Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is about 8:17, and we're live. So, still working on a few things here, trying to get everything situated. So, there we go. Okay, now we've got some stuff. So, let's switch over. There we go. All right. So, we're working off of a couple cameras. This is probably a little better view, a little bright. Let's see if we can brighten that up a little. That's a little better. Okay, there we go. All right, we're live. We're working the technical issues out on everything and trying to get everything ready here. The debate starts at about 9 o'clock. So we'll be bringing that to you tonight live at 9 o'clock. We'll be going from there. So we got a few minutes to go from here. So just gonna move. There we go. Moving the camera down a little so we can talk. All right. So, yeah, we're going to take that out. Can we just get out of there? There we go. Okay. We'll leave that up just in case. All right. In case there's a total crash, we do have another camera and mic set up ready to go. Like I said, it is about 8:18 on the Eastern Standard Time. If you're in Philadelphia, hope you're having fun tonight. It's going to be a lot going on. So the debate is in Philadelphia, PA. Is the presidential debate between Republican candidate, former President Donald J. Trump, and Democratic candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris. So those are our contenders for tonight. I think it's going to be interesting. They've been doing a lot of prep for this, so we'll see what happens. This is supposedly going to be the only debate, is what they're saying on ABC News. I think you still got time. You could do one early October and see what happens and still be able to hit all the news feeds and all the news groups there and go with that. So, I don't know why they can't do another one. Hopefully they can. I think the more both these candidates talk, the more interesting this race gets. So we're here tonight. We're going to watch it. It's going to be going through, mostly going to let it play out. I'm not going to try to jump in so much so you can hear what the candidates are saying. There will be two commercial breaks, and we could do some discussion at that time. Now, I'm not expecting a lot of people to watch this live and be going with me the whole 3 hours. So if you're just watching this on playback or you jump into this as we're doing it live, feel free to jump out of it, jump back in when you see moments you might want to talk about. I don't expect anyone to go the full 3 hours, but bless your little soul if you do the full 3 hours. So yeah, we'll be going till about 11 o'clock tonight, 11:15-ish. We'll do a little chat after the whole thing, and we'll go from there as long as everything stays working. So we'll go along with that. I see a few people jumping in live. That's great. Yeah, so still got about 38 minutes or so till the debate starts. So we'll go from there. Once the debate starts, I will put on some headphones so I can hear everything. So if you see that, I'm just going with the flow, trying to make things easy here on the show. Yeah. So what can we talk about in the meantime running up to this? What do the polls look like? Okay, so the polls look like Donald Trump is ahead by 4 points. It's kind of odd because what's about 2 weeks ago, they had Harris up by 4 points. So margin of error, I guess, is 4 points now because it looks like a pretty tight race. I think a lot of people just aren't coming out and being as vocal about who they're voting for at this point. And there's probably quite a bit of people who are just going to check out of this whole thing and are just not going to even vote, whether they don't like either of the candidates, they don't like how the whole process went, they just are too just tired and distracted from all of it and don't really care. I think you might see a good chunk of people on that. You know, people feel deflated over this past year. Like I said, I think in the springtime, people got either a reality check or something happened where they realized that they couldn't afford their lives anymore and they weren't trying to overspend. And so a lot of businesses felt that. And so you're seeing a lot of companies either do bankruptcy restructurings or just simply filing and just closing the doors. We heard yesterday Big Lots is actually filed bankruptcy, Chapter 11. They are going to close some stores, possibly restructure, get rid of some debt, and then sell to a private capital group, I believe is the entity that would buy it. That's not their name, but that's who they are. So, little good news. Red Lobster says that they are ready to jump out of bankruptcy. Apparently, they closed enough stores, got through enough debt, are now ready to run in a completely different ways from what I see. And they're going to actually try and run their business properly and see what it goes. I'm guessing no more all-you-can-eat shrimp, since that was really one of the things that they said really killed them business-wise. So, you know, sometimes you need to just take a step back and restructure things, look at things, see where income is, see where expenses are, and see how you can change it to make it a little bit better. There's nothing wrong with going down or downsizing to get ahead in life. It's really something that can absolutely be a lifesaver. So don't be afraid if you need to do that. I will be going all 3 hours. I've got some Coke, liquid Coke, to get me through. Gotta try to stay up for this, keep the energy going all 3 hours. So we'll go from there. So yeah, if you normally watch the show, like to do it between an hour and a half hour. So this is going to be a bit of a stretch, but like I say, a lot of it will be consumed with the debate. I'm going to let it just kind of like run itself, and we'll be able to listen in, hear what these questions are going to be, what are the answers going to be. The mics will be muted, which I think helps Trump. You might still hear him once or twice, but for the most part, it does kind of let the people speak their own mind and kind of go on their thought rather than the back and forth volley of, you know, shouting back and forth or yelling at each other through the whole thing. So for somebody who can think through their thoughts and have a good game plan, I think that helps them. Now, again, I'm going to come out and say this. I don't think Harris is as dumb as everyone thinks she is. Now, that's not to say that she's not dumb. I just think she has the wrong thoughts in her head. But, you know, she is using a tactic right now of basically not stating what her ultimate positions would be. She's been jumping on the bandwagon of the Trump campaign with a lot of the stuff she's been putting out. There are some propositions of hers that are, I mean, completely left, but there are quite a few that are right. You know, stop talking about stopping the border, talking about what was the other stuff she was on? She was saying no taxes on tips and stuff like that. So I think she's trying to fit herself into the middle with everything. Uh Now, it's really tough when you've been taught by a Marxist economist from Stanford. That would be her father, which no one really seems to be talking about. And some of the lines she's used are actually from Marxist books and readings. So the it's what you've been taught and how you use it can tell whether you have a pretty good grip on stuff. And I think she's trying to use the teachings and kind of camouflage some of the stuff she wants to do. And it's slick. It's really slick because you're talking about stuff that she's never going to do because she's going to do something completely different. But if it catches a few independent voters, then it works. So that's why I think you might underestimate her a little and the tactics they're trying to do, you know. So you got to kind of look at it as what is really being put out there. Um, we've seen a couple reports of what both candidates are going to be running on, and there's a lot of questions about some of the stuff they want to do. For instance, with Trump, he wants to do in vitro fertilization, IVF, I'll call it, and he wants insurances to pay for it. And that's not something that I'm totally on board with, because if insurance are paying for it, they're going to work it so that everyone pays for it, because that's the point of the insurance. Insurance is you are putting money into a pot, then anyone who needs the money from the pot for whatever they need to fix or do, such as homeowners insurance and auto insurance, then everyone ultimately is paying for whatever happened. So if you say that IVF is going to be available and everyone's going to pay for it because insurance is going to pay for it, what about the people who never use it? Like, there are people who don't have children. There are women who can bear children without IVF. So why is it on them to pay for people who can't? Now, if they can work this with the insurances to say that, they take the money out of profits that the insurance companies makes, because come on. We know the insurance company overcharges us, but that they also take some of that money and invest it in other stuff. So using the interest off of other investments might be an easier way to kind of work it into the system without having to charge people a much higher premium, so that, you can go back and charge premiums to the people that actually use that service to replenish that pot. It's a little weird, a little wacky, but it might be able to be done so that the most of the brunt of the cost would be on the person actually using the services, versus simply just charging everyone a certain fee and then only a select few get to use that. So on both sides of this debate, there's a lot of policies that need to really be looked into. Will these actually go through? Not even really sure. I think they're kind of throwing stuff up in the wind right now just to see what connects with their base and what kind of catches the independent voters. So we'll see where everything goes from there. Just gonna take a swig real quick. All right, so yeah, it's about 8:31, about 29 minutes till the debate starts. We'll be going from there. There we go. So we'll be going from there to see what's going on. Just testing everything, make sure everything's okay. Looks all right. All right. Okay, we'll just leave that there. All right. So, what else is going on that anyone wants to talk to? Feel free to drop in the live chat. I didn't put it into the description of the video, but we got some Disney news. Came out that Bob Iger was the one who closed down Disneyland during the COVID closures. So at the time that it was going on, 2020, according to a New York Times report, Governor Newsom of California actually made a phone call to Bob Iger saying that he didn't think he should close Disneyland down because it would, traumatize the people, I guess. And Bob Iger actually made the call to say, yes, we should actually close down Disneyland. And at the time, he had already passed over the CEO reins to Bob Chapek. So Chapek was a little miffed at that because, yeah, he would have made the same decision, but he wasn't consulted on making that decision. So apparently they're trying to kind of destroy this myth that Iger was not there the whole time, which, I think a lot of people saw that he really was there the whole time, still running everything from behind the scenes. So that was something that came out. Another thing that's going on right now is they're going to have a celebration for Out and Loud, which is basically a gay community. And they're going to be doing some conferences at the Walt Disney World Resort. Now, I got nothing against that. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that the Secret Service will be providing details for the Walt Disney World Resort. Not only will they be providing details at the Walt Disney World Resort, this will be during the month of October, which is right by the election. This will also be available to those who have maxed out their overtime. So if a certain Secret Service agent has maxed out his overtime, his or her overtime, they will be able to still be able to participate in the Walt Disney World event and receive overtime. So, here's something crazy. Okay, well, the Secret Service was mostly there to protect political people and their families during election cycles and, governmental affairs. So, why is the Secret Service being called down to Walt Disney World for the Out and Loud celebration? I'm digging deeper into that, but I can already tell you right now, here's a simple question. Who authorized it? Was it Disney? Was it Out and Loud? And why did they not just use a private agency, private Secret Service firm or protection firm, or for whatever detail they needed? So as we look into that to find out who actually authorized it, it just goes to the fact that they just keep making some of the weirdest decisions out there on how they're operating with all the stuff that they're doing. And, CNBC had this great article, is a Disney vacation priced out for middle of the road families, the middle class? And they basically came out and just said, yeah. And it's not really hard to see why. I mean, you have to buy the hotel. You have to get the flight tickets. You have to now pay for transportation from the airport to the hotel. You have to pay for tickets. You have to pay for food. You then say, well, I want to make sure I ride the rides that I want to ride. So you have to pay for Lightning Lane. You have to buy some souvenirs. Then you have to pay for any unexpected stuff that may come up. So a usual trip for four to, let's say, middle of the road resort for Disney for 7 days used to cost around what, 2,000, 2,500. That same trip now costs close to 10,000. So yeah, I think it's really priced out of a lot of people's hands. Like you just can't go anymore. And it's not actually not that bad of a thing because I've been looking at the wait times, thinking about maybe going back, getting some tickets, and it's not even that the wait times are long, it's that so much stuff is either closed down, shut down, not running. They're doing construction on stuff still. They're getting rid of animals because they have to redo attractions and stuff. Recent report from the seas says that the dolphins and a manatee will actually be leaving. They'll replace the manatee with another manatee they need to care for, and the dolphins will eventually come back once they're done doing whatever they're doing. But it just kind of leaves you with this sign of, well, wait a minute, caution. Is anything going to be going on when I get there? Is the stuff I want to do actually going to be up? Like I'm spending all this money, I saved all this, or I put it on my credit card, which is a horrible idea. But I'm trying to go down there to see it with my kids, and now I may not even get the experience I want. So yeah, it's dismal Disney news, and honestly, they need to redo everything. Really, they need to stop and look back at the Eisner years, and as bad as he was, that everybody says that there were a lot of good things that were going on then, and you just look at it, you know. Well, how can we be better? We'll be better than everybody else. You know, one thing I rail on, and I'm not sure if they're still doing it or not, 'cause some reports say they don't, is the overnight parking fees. You know, the reason they came out with it was, oh, okay, your car's staying at a resort for 7 days. It's taking a parking spot that we might need, so we're going to charge you. Why are we doing it? Well, every other resort does it. And that was really what pissed me off to the point where I said, okay, wait a minute, this is going in a horrible direction. Was because you guys started answering questions of these new things that were coming up as, well, other resorts do it, other vacation destinations do it. So now we're going to do it. And that was the point of Disney, was you were supposed to be better than everybody else. You were supposed to do things that nobody else could do. And you were supposed to leave people with wonderment and, you know, these amazing and fantastic memories, and not, oh man, I just got the bill that was the $18 every night because my car was parked there. Like that wasn't what people wanted. So I think they really need to adjust themselves and look at that and say, okay, what do the people really want? Give them that. Give them that. And then it'll get better. It'll go from there and get better. All right. A little bit of a rant. Let's see what's going on. Da, 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 da. All right, we're just looking, seeing what's going on. Da, na, 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 na. Okay, they seem to be on a commercial break, so we're going to get into that as soon as we can. and then we'll go from there. Yes, commercial break. Okay. All right. So if you're just joining us, we are getting ready for the ABC News presidential debate. We'll be streaming it from the ABC News site. I'm going to let it mostly play. You'll be able to watch, listen to the candidates, hear what they have to say, and during breaks and after, we'll do a little talk. We'll go over stuff and see how things are going. It is 8:42, so we have about 17 minutes until the debate actually starts. So we're just doing some just chit chat going on with what's happening, what's going on. A lot of other people are now jumping on board, but hey, I'm happy you're here watching with me and everybody else watching along. So thank you for showing up, for supporting. Make sure you follow, subscribe, depending on what platform you're watching. And hey, who knows? You might be watching the next Walter Cronkite right here. So we'll go with that. We'll see where that goes. So yeah, if anybody wants to chat, live chat is open. Feel free to drop a comment in there. We can discuss. How do you feel about this debate going on right now? Do you think the real questions are going to be asked? Do you think we're going to get a lot of back and forth, or do you think it's just going to be very structured? Let me know what you think. Once again, I am the angriest man in Orlando. It's kind of raining right now. So, no better way to kill a rainy night than to jump on board and watch along as we go through the debate. All right. So we've got, they're talking to Senator Tom Cotton right now. Kind of just, how do you feel about it? What do you feel is going to happen? Like each side's going to talk about their own side. Like there's nothing new about this kind of stuff. You just you toe the party line. You say what you got to say to go through it. Like, this never like amazing thing happens. I think it's only happened at a few debates. And so, you kind of, it's like NASCAR. You're just watching for that car crash to happen. You're just hoping somebody says something just so crazy and nutty that it makes it worth it. But we'll see. We are now only 14 minutes away. We have some great drinking games going on Facebook. Somebody put out, take a shot every time Donald Trump says huge. What's the other one? Let's see the other one. Take a shot every time Kamala Harris says unburdened. Okay, we'll go with that. All right, that's great. So we'll see how those go. Feel free to drink if you want to. I've got my own. So yeah. So we are just about 2 months away. November 5th is election day. Right? Just double check that. Yes, November 5th is election day. So you're less than 2 months away. I think you're kind of just shooting at the independent voters now and just picking up on anyone who, may have been with RFK Jr. and are now still like looking around and not quite sure. Do I really want to go with Harris? Do I really want to go with Trump? And see who you think you should go with. So we'll see what goes from there. Like I say, we are now about 8:47, so it's about 12 minutes away. We'll jump into that. I'm gonna put on some headphones, so do not be alarmed, and we'll be going from there. Da, 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 da. So, other news coming up. We do have the Federal Reserve meeting next week on Tuesdays and Wednesday, and they will be making a decision. I was gonna save this till Thursday's show, but I believe I had that when I said the earliest they will be making a rate cut would be September. And by all measures of votes from people who know what's going on, there should be a rate cut. Will it be a quarter point? Will it be a half point? That's what we have to see. Okay, so it looks like we kind of had a little bit of a blackout there. Yeah, just measuring that. This is why I did 2 cameras, and this is why I do this stuff, because you never know what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm getting power back up onto the main computer right now, be able to get everything going. We still have about 10 minutes away from the debate. And like I was saying, we have the Federal Reserve meeting next week, and they will, let's put that on, there we go. And they will be deciding on a rate cut. I think if you see a quarter point rate cut, then, you know, they're trying to adjust and they're trying to fix stuff. The unemployment rate went up and then went down slightly, but I think it's really up. I think they overreported on their jobs. If the Fed does go with a half point, I think that invokes a lot of chaos. And I think you'll see a lot of action going on, especially in the Asian markets. They're very volatile right now. The very slightest hint that the American markets are not strong, their markets have been falling based on that. So we're going to have to sit tight and kind of see what happens with these rate cuts. How big will it be? Is it going to be where we want it? I personally would like to see just quarter point. I don't think it's really going to help a lot, but it will give some solace to people who have interest on credit cards, on refinancing, home loans, maybe going to buy a new car or a used car. Those people will be able to get a little bit of a break, not a lot, but, and it might help somebody get into something. So we'll have to see where that goes. That's going to be happening next week on Wednesday, I believe. Tuesday, Wednesday's meeting. So it'll be happening around then. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that on next Tuesday. This Tuesday, where you're watching right now, we're getting ready for the live presidential debate from Philadelphia, PA, between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. So just follow along and we'll go from there. So slowly getting everything back up. We had a little bit of a glitch, but this is why I prepare for stuff like this. This is why I keep things rolling. We're still rolling here. So, no live comments yet. We'll see where things go from here. All right. Working on it. I do produce my own shows, so you will see me kind of bouncing around a little. Also, we don't take any money for our show. Okay. I produce this show and I produce the 2 Men in a Room show on Thursdays, and I don't take any money for it. We don't have any advertisers. We don't have any slush money coming in from anywhere. We don't have Russian money coming in. There's no propaganda through any of this. These are our real opinions being thrown on the show. The comments are the real opinions of those posting, and you can guarantee that you are going to get a real experience when you are watching these shows. So trust me, there's nothing nefarious going on here. So guarantee you that. All right, so we are about 7 minutes away, and I'm just reloading the computer so we can get the programming in. Like I say, it is raining out there. It is lightning, thunder. So I was expecting possible little electrical burst there. But keeping the show rolling, keeping the wheels moving, and going from there. Let's get this back up and running. Thank you everyone for staying in on me. We do have a couple people still watching. So yeah. Excitement never ends over here. All right. Da, da, da. All right, no live comments. Feel free to drop in a hello, whatever you need to do. Okay, where can we? Okay. All right. All right. Okay. All right, we're trying to do this and do this at the same time. Little technical snafu. We'll back up and running in just a few minutes. So we are going to watch the presidential debate once I get everything running here and going through everything. And we'll be back up by 9 o'clock. We've got about 5 minutes left before they actually start. So stick with us. We are working through the technical glitches that running a live podcast is all about. So, okay. Okay. So we're just about 5 minutes away from the presidential debate going on. You'll be able to see for the first time our two presidential candidates being able to talk to each other and answer the questions that ABC News wants us to hear. Da, 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 I am working on reloading the computer that will allow us to be able to watch this, so stay tuned. Working on it right now. Okay. I wish I had some music or something to play for you guys, but it's just not here. I guess I can hum a little or something. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. I don't know. Da 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 da. All right, folks, we're just a few moments away from getting in to the presidential debate. So, slowly trying to bring everything back up and running so that way we can get this going. Okay. All right, hopefully you should be able to hear me on the main mic right now. And we're going to try and bring me back on the main camera. There we go. All right, fantastic. Dropping that. There we go. All right, now let's bring up ABC News if we could do this. Right. Okay. Okay.
And we will be back with
Okay.
our post-game show. So we are going to toss it right now.
So I'm going to silence that just for a minute. That is going to be running. I will be bringing it back up. And we're going.
Harris and former President Donald Trump, their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face ever.
A historic race president up did just weeks ago. Biden after his last debate, Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic.
Anyone in the live chat, let me know if you can hear it.
The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions at the clock. 2 minutes for rebuttals, 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written note. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Candidates have arrived.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion of America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate. I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay.
Did Harris?
I want to turn to the issue
China
of abortion.
caused COVID?
President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, this governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, Every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion, no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his budget 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everyone else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. Went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane, strangers, to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it. And what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris.
Respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her
Why-
that question?
why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question, would you
Because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies because it's a really interesting. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She
Bring up
said
the
people start
assassination
leaving.
attempt.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But They have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what high documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any conduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work at sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are evil. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Ooh.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago, her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured and died. And understand, The former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
Judge looked at it
and said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by whiskers. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how. Saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery efforts. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it. because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential national institution. Right back.
That was the beginning. Some body shots thrown out there. Trump getting in the first, I'm speaking. So kind of stole that from her. I gotta say, the constant head moving, rolling of the eyes, rolling back is just, it's too emotional. I think when you're looking at a leader, you're not looking for somebody who can just start, because you do that in front of a world leader. A world leader is going to think like you're totally disrespecting them. You're just giving them the finger, basically. And it could start World War III. Like, that's ridiculous. You stand there, you take in what you're listening to, and then you come back with it. I'm not a professional politician, so I can make a smirk or two. But these are professional politicians. They should know this. Policy has been very lacking in this whole thing on both sides. I haven't heard a lot of it, but I've heard a lot more truth on the side of Trump versus Harris. So Harris seems to just keep rolling back to the talking points. My mother, growing up, business, my friend getting assaulted. Like, it's just the talking points. There's no actual policy. There's no actual, hey, on I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And Trump brings up the very good point. You're the vice president right now. Stop the debate right now. Stop the debate right now. Get on your private plane, go down there and sign the bill. Put the legislation in. Wake up Biden. Get something done. You have the ability to do that right now. So why are you bringing this? Well, on day one, I'm going to do this and we're eventually going to get to this policy and we're going to change this. Like, dude, you could do it right now. There's no need to sit and say, well, I'm going to get to this and I'm going to get to that. And the immigration thing has been wonderful to listen to. And it's been exciting. And if you haven't heard, we'll go over those two cities. What was it? Aurora, Colorado, where an entire apartment complex was taken over by the Tren de Agua. Sorry. My apologies to that. For the pronunciation. The Tren de Aguera gang from Venezuela has taken over the complex. They were supposedly let in because this was a complex that was going to be used to house illegal immigrants. And they basically went door to door with AK-47s and AR-15s and said, hey, we're just taking over the whole damn thing. So it's also happening in other cities. I'm surprised they didn't mention Chicago. And then just recently in El Paso, this is happening, where these gangs are simply just taking over. People don't know what to do. Local sheriffs don't know what to do. And you may have to bring the military in to get these people out of here. The Ohio incident is something that has come up in the news over the last day or two, which is 20,000 Haitian immigrants. Looks like it could be illegal status immigrants. Were basically brought into this town of, I believe it's Springfield, did they say? And now there are reports that pets are missing and several accounts that are saying, yeah, they took the animal for sacrifice or to eat or for something was going on. and that's your pet. Imagine little Snowball or Rex, you goes out for the night or happens to run out of the house, and you never see your pet again. I mean, it's crazy. Is it happening? We need more investigation, but I do know down in Haiti and several of the islands, they do sacrifices with animals. I don't know if they eat the animals, but they do sacrifices with the animals. So it is a possibility.
New York.
Back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less. Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? Hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell, but after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
First of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I wanted to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, you're on this.
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to Black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris.
Who
thank you.
supported
Lindsey?
Black Lives
President
Matter?
Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. One of the greatest economies in the history of the world. And I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad.
Mr.
And she
President,
can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I
Lindsey.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn
we
to
have to
policy.
move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsey,
to
go ahead.
respond because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
3rd time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so they have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president has said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. They're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable, but we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal on that one? Ukraine, China. Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, so there we go. Second round. A lot of what was said is pretty much talking points. Nothing really was blown up by that. I think we've all seen a lot of the stuff that's been going on with what was said. I'll bring up the auto worker stuff because I am a car guy. I do follow this a lot. Right now, Stellantis, which owns Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, is trying to close plants around the country with multiple models and moving them out. Moving production of the Ram 1500 truck to Mexico, production of the Grand Cherokee to Egypt, and production of the Durango replacement, the Dodge Durango SUV, up to Canada. So these jobs will not be American auto worker jobs. They'll be in other countries. And they're doing it because they pretty much freely can do it. There's been no intervention from the U.S. government. There's been no intervention from the United Auto Workers. There's reports that the head, his name was brought up, has not said a word about any of it. He just showed up at the DNC, said he didn't like Trump, never said anything about the jobs being lost, plants being closed, plants being shut down, shifts going. People are being laid off right now, and I'm not hearing really anything to change it. They're really saying, well, the other person did it, and the other person did it. As for the Affordable Care Act, I tried for it once and was told I made too much money, which I really didn't make much money at the time anyway. And I honestly think that doctors know that the government's going to pay. So the doctors in the medical companies can charge whatever they want. There's no competition. So, if a surgery is normally $500, you'd have to wait for somebody to either get a loan or save up and have to get the surgery. But with the government, it's coming, so you send the bill to them for $750 and say, yeah, the surgery is normally $750. Government says, yeah, okay, we got to pay it. Okay, we'll schedule it. This is why insurance costs are so high. So when the doctor says he could do $750 for the government insurance, he says, yeah, we could probably do $750 for the other insurance companies too. Now, the other insurance companies don't want to be put out of business. They got to compete with the government. So they say, okay, we'll just, raise the premiums on this person or do something to try to keep them going. But eventually they're going to have to raise the premium. So the next year when your company says, hey, premiums went up and we can't pay 100% this year, we can only pay 60%, and you're going to have to pay the 40%. Well, now that starts hurting you regular people, American people. So I think the government insurance thing is well-intentioned, but seriously hurting the whole system, and it's just a factor of business. I mean, if you can charge more, why wouldn't you charge more? People need money. If you're selling cookies and you realize people will pay $1 for your cookies, but you were selling them for 50 cents, why wouldn't you put it up to $1? Make the extra money so you could buy a bigger oven, more dough for the cookies, maybe get yourself a whole building where you could sell the cookies. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's the concept of business. You charge and get, and you build your business. If you could charge more and get more, you want to build a bigger, better business. So a lot of so with this debate, nothing really new. So
time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Thank you. And we are here live on ABC with our post-debate.
All right, we're going to drop the ABC coverage and wrap up here. I want to thank everyone who was watching through that whole thing. I saw a few drop out at the end, but hey, you went 2 hours, so thank you for staying on board. I'm kind of perplexed they didn't bring up the gay, trans, lesbian, LGBTQ agenda at all. They didn't talk about that. They did bring up abortion as the second topic, economy being the first. I think Trump was right in hammering it down to say that, you know, he gave it back to the states, and the states have the rights to decide what they want for it. And that involves people voting on it, which is the antithesis of our government. People voting, you know, governmental politicians are representatives of the people, and the people need to vote for it and vote for the policies. So giving it back to the states and having them vote on it, I think, you know, whether you want pro-choice or pro-life, it gives the people back the right to do what they want to do with all that. Okay, final wrap up. Harris, I think she didn't hit very hard on stuff. Her policies of giving 50,000 to new businesses, 100 what was it, 100,000 for a new home or something like that, or trying to build 500,000 new homes and $6,000 for kids. It's just more free money into the system, which just brings up more inflation. You don't have items, you don't have supply, you just have the money. And we already saw that over the last 3 years where inflation just kept going up and interest rates had to go up to fix it. And it could happen again. I mean, if you give 25,000 to buy a new home, people will just raise the sale price of the home 25,000. If your house is 400 grand, you sell it at 425 now because you know people are going to have that money. And for the people who can't get that money, you lose out on homes. You lose out on buying your dream home because they jacked it up extra because they knew somebody had the money for it. So I don't think it achieves the American dream quite the way that she thinks it would. Again, with the emotionalness, there was 2 instances where she kind of wanted to go off the rails a little and held herself back in. And when you're doing negotiations on a world scale, you cannot be that emotional on that. And that could easily start wars or, even worse. As Trump said, Russia has nuclear weapons. There are also other countries with nuclear weapons: Iran, China, North Korea. Make no mistake, you need to be turning the fire down when you're doing negotiations with countries. And if she were to let something slip, that could be absolutely dangerous. Again, that was what little policy she has let out. I was actually shocked that she said she and Tim Walz actually own guns. I did not know either one of them owned a gun. I'm actually quite perplexed by that and may want to look into that in the morning. So that was actually something that I guess was the surprise of the night. As for Donald Trump, I think he hit well. I'm surprised he didn't bring up the attempted assassination. There were several times where he could have brought that up and really hammered home how they haven't tried to even figure out how it happened or even why it happened. I don't even think we really know why. You know, I don't think the parents have been really investigated. I mean, we seem to know more about the school shooter in Georgia and his parents than we did about the potential assassin. So that was something I think he should have brought up and hammered down a little more on. And it could have been a sticking mark for this accusation of using the DOJ to go after opponents. I think you can clearly see over the last few months who's been actually doing that. Will Trump do it? Like he says, he might go after people to the fullest extent of the law, which if they are doing something illegal, I think he does have the right as the president to do that. Don't recklessly go after people, but if things are shady, yeah, investigations should happen. So how do we fix the country? Here's my closing thoughts on it. Yeah, we need to get energy back up. Oil prices have been going down recently due to lack of usage. Like China's economy is going down. Like they're just not using as much fuel. So OPEC's kind of put everything on hold. They're not going to raise, but they're not going to lower. And so you can see that the same amount of fuel is pumping out but yet not as many people are using it. So that's where you're seeing the gas prices go down. It's not anybody doing anything. It's actually lack of people doing things. So that'll put a little bit of money back into people's pockets. If we see this interest rate cut next week, that might help some, but probably not many. It's really going to take kind of a flushing of the system, which is starting to happen this year. And I want to say the recession probably has already started. They'll go back and look at it and kind of refresh where it may have started. But the putting out the fear that Donald Trump will win and there'll be a recession, there's going to be a recession anyway. It's already here. It's already happening. People are losing jobs. Companies are going down. People are not buying vehicles. Home prices are still high, even though the interest rate on a 30-year mortgage is now down 1.5 to 6.2%. There's still not people buying. So the theory that, oh, we'll just bring the rates down is not going to help much either. And people are just not buying, which means the people that are supplying don't need anybody anymore. They don't need those extra people on the line. So a lot of jobs are going to slowly be getting cut over the next couple months because everyone holding back, whether they're holding back for the lower interest rate or they're holding back because they can't afford it at all. The simple equation of that is well, now I don't need to produce as much. You don't need to produce as many windows. So you lay off some people in the warehouse and in the manufacturing. We don't need as much lumber to build homes. Okay, well, stop cutting the trees and fire some loggers, and it slowly snowballs into more and more layoffs and simply just throwing money at the situation as we've seen over the last 3 years. It doesn't work. It just puts you back into that high inflation and low outcome. So there's no real fast way to get through all this. It's just going to be a slow, methodical process to get out of it. When people feel comfortable again, they'll start buying again, start bringing people back, and then we go from there. So I don't know. I don't think anything's going to change poll wise. There, like I said, there wasn't any real surprises to this other than watch out, don't break into Miss Harris's residence. She has a gun. Yeah, that's the only surprise I think that came out of it. Hopefully there'll be one more debate and we can kind of see maybe final policies from both of them. I had not heard that Donald Trump was working on a replacement for the Affordable Care Act. I'd be very curious to see what his proposals that he said he supposedly has is. Be very interesting. Hopefully he can release that before November, give people some kind of, thoughts and ideas of, hey, could insurance be even lower? So we're going to wrap up. It's about 11 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard. I want to thank everyone who watched. If we get one more debate, we'll do this again. So get your Coca-Cola ready and stay up with me. And I'll be back on Thursday night on 2 Men in a Room. And then every Tuesday on here on the Angriest Man in Orlando show, where we just talk about what we're angry about. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And as always, stay angry.